Now, the government's being urged to clarify whether we should or should not wear face coverings when we go into shops. The approach to face coverings has shifted considerably since the early days of the pandemic. So what's the thinking? Let's catch up, as we do every Monday, with Dr. Duncan Robertson from Loughborough University School of Business and Economics. Duncan, hi.
Good morning, Dan.
Now, look, the whole mask thing, the kind of debate on it's changed from it being actually not the thing to do to having a marginal effect to maybe having to wear them in shops full stop. Where are we in all of that?
Well, I think, at the early stages, there was obviously an issue with supply of masks. And of course, then masks, quite rightly, would be prioritised for kind of frontline healthcare workers. But now as we're moving through, kind of 6 months on almost, there's more and more research that's been done about masks and about how it's transmitted. And I think, the Royal Society came up with a report a few weeks ago, basically setting out their thinking. It's called the Delve report. And this is basically looking at, face masks basically stop these droplets. So therefore, that's a good thing. But of course, that's kind of protecting other people, and they don't necessarily protect you as much as a kind of proper mask, but they do help a little bit. So masks, I think, on balance, are moving towards a good thing.
Do you see us coming to the point at which we have to wear them?
Well, it's difficult, isn't it? Because as soon as someone tells you something to do, then perhaps, you react. Whereas if, there's a certain amount of encouragement going on and there's a sort of societal pressure, then you can see there is some sort of, debate for encouraging rather than enforcing. But of course, the problem is with all these sort of public health issues, it just takes one person to not do something in line with the convention, and then they have an effect on other people. So therefore, in my opinion, it doesn't have to move towards enforcement, and I think that's enforcement of wearing masks and enforcement of these, government guidelines, which are fairly vague, and there's certain elements of common sense there. But if someone in a business, for example, isn't, complying with these COVID secure guidelines, who do you call, right?
Yeah.
So it's a bit vague at the moment, and I think as the weeks go on and as perhaps the incident starts creeping up, people will start demanding these things, I would imagine.
I thought it was interesting, actually, because, I popped into a local garden centre over the weekend, and it just occurred to me that there was where there would normally be, seeds or trowels or something, there was a huge wall of different types of masks, really nicely made stuff, beautifully packaged up, all branded and stuff. And it just occurred to me, wow, that there's become an industry in that. And if that then happens, then it becomes the norm, doesn't it?
Well, exactly. And certainly when I was, talking to my colleagues back in sort of February, I was saying there's a terrible, social pressure not to wear a mask. But of course, things are changing now. And I think as more people wear them, there's sort of lots of research on basically you do what your peers do. And if you see people doing things like wearing masks, more people are going to wear masks. And I think this is how it's going to work. It's sort of going to be self-reinforcing. So I think, yeah, absolutely, masks are on the way.
It's bizarre because I'm just we have a sort of television with a BBC News feed in here, and they're just doing a feature actually about the anti-mask demonstrators in the States, which is really ratcheted up, and there's people holding placards saying that it restricts the breath you can get in, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There's been an enormous reaction to wearing masks in the States and being told to do something that people don't fancy.
Well, that's right, and of course, people can potentially manipulate the way that this evidence is shown, and that's why I think going back to the scientists, look at the Delve report on the Royal Society webpage, and it will set out the evidence that they've used for those. And so I think, certainly there could be a resistance to being told what to do. But, you've got to think not only about yourself, you've got to think about other people. And I think we're, perhaps more tuned to think about ourselves. But of course, I may infect somebody else who may infect one of my relatives. So, it goes both ways. And that's kind of a societal problem.
Look, I hesitate to bring this up again because it's something we've talked about a lot, and it's data. Where are we with the data that is being used to effectively, run the Leicester lockdown? We heard Jonathan Van Tam, the Deputy CMO, on the show today. We've heard Sir Peter Soulsby. Where are we with all of that? Where are the figures moving?
So I think once again, I'll without getting into the debates about perhaps sound over politics, the evidence is out there on the Public Health England website, and they list basically every week how many cases have been found per 100,000 population. And I think over the last few weeks, so looking at the sort of latest figures, we have about 117 cases or positive tests, that is, per 100,000. And so it's still high, but of course the problem is we don't know how many tests are being carried out. So if you test more people, it's likely that more people are going to be detected. So it's very difficult to interpret that figure, but it's still high.
And what's the trend got to be before somebody says, okay, well, I mean, what Jonathan Van Tam was suggesting this morning, they're not going to switch off the lockdown in Leicester, it would seem, and I don't think anybody, I should emphasise, I don't think anybody's made a decision about this, but it would seem some kind of phased exit from extended lockdown. What have the figures got to show?
Well, I think nobody knows in the case of the UK. So countries like Germany have set fairly, defined markers. So to go back into what they call the emergency brake, which is the kind of lockdown, they talk about this 50 cases per 100,000 population. Let's say Leicester's currently at 117. But, of course, where you go out of lockdown may not be the same number as you go into lockdown. And it's not just this number. You've got to look at where they are. So, of course, this case that's come up in Herefordshire at a farm is very high, but it's kind of constrained or contained within a geographical area, a farm. So it's not, and that's a problem when you get these figures. They're consolidated at Leicester or Leicestershire or regional levels, and you don't quite know what's happening at that local kind of postcode street level.
And that's where that's the key to that, isn't it? I mean, that's what Sir Peter Soulsby was saying on the show earlier on. It's about the I hate the phrase, the granularity, or the just how fine that detail is that helps you make decisions. Is that fair?
Exactly. So, of course, when we went on, speaking months ago, it was all about the UK we were looking at. Then it's kind of goes down to, local authorities like Leicester. And then, within there are awards. And I think what's, being the issue is exactly how much data local authorities get about where these cases are. And I think, the more data you have, the more specific data you have, or at least the local authorities and the directors of public health, they know their local areas and they know exactly what that postcode means. Whereas someone looking at it from, a database somewhere miles away is just seeing a figure and is making decisions on that basis. So directors of public health are the people who know the local communities, and they should, in my view, have access to that very local data.
Duncan, thanks ever so much for keeping an eye on this for us. Thank you. I mean, you have been a brilliant guide for these last 4 months. I have a feeling we'll be talking to you for a while longer. We've never met face to face either, which is the bizarrest thing. Duncan, it's great to talk to you. Can't wait to have you in the studio at some point in the future.
Thanks, Ben. Thank you.
All right. Dr. Duncan Robertson, you can find him online as well. He's got a great blog, which kind of goes into all this stuff in a bit more detail.